Hello everyone, it is really wonderful to see you here. I hope you are having a great day. Today's topic is something that holds a very important place in all of our lives, but something we rarely stop to think about: our eating habits. How and when did we eat? Who did we eat with? How did these habits change over time? We are going to discover very interesting things on this journey stretching from thousands of years ago to today. If you are ready, let's begin. Let's go back to very ancient times first. Approximately 3,000 years ago, meaning around 1000 BC. The world was a very different place. People were not going to a market to buy bread like we do today. There was no such thing as ready-made food. There was no refrigerator. In fact, in most places there were not even written recipes. So what did people eat? The answer is actually simple, but just as thought-provoking. In the old days, people ate whatever was available. The vast majority of people in this period were farmers or involved in animal husbandry. When you woke up in the morning, there was no ready-made breakfast plate in front of you. If you had planted and harvested grain, you had flour. You would grind that flour and make dough. If you raised animals, there was milk and cheese. If you had hunted, there was meat. But having these things was very hard. Just think about it. Today we go into a market and buy ready-made food when we are tired after work. Back then, the only work was working in the fields. People worked just to be able to eat. People had to walk tens of kilometers, carry loads on their backs, work for hours under the sun. When you got home, the work was not over either. You had to prepare the food. Today you can eat strawberries in January. You can find oranges in July. But 3,000 years ago, this was not possible. On the contrary, it was impossible. People ate according to the seasons. In spring, fresh herbs, root vegetables, and early fruits were accessible. Summer months were abundant. Fruits, vegetables, grains. Autumn was harvest time. Everything collected during summer was used to prepare for winter. Winter was the most difficult period of the year. In winter, the table would have dried meat, salted fish, pickled vegetables, dried grains, stored root vegetables, and fermented dairy products. These foods were stockpiled to get through winter. If you had not been able to stockpile enough, or if the harvest had gone badly, winter could be very bitter. Hunger was real. Today we restrict ourselves by saying, "I am on a diet." Back then, this was a necessity. How many meals were eaten per day then? This is also an interesting question. Eating 3 meals a day is actually a relatively new habit. 3,000 years ago, especially for ordinary people, there were generally 1 or 2 meals a day. Early in the morning, something light would be eaten before starting the day. A porridge made from grain, some olives, some cheese, maybe dried fruit. Nothing heavy, something quickly prepared. The main big meal was in the evening. After the day's work was done, the family or community would come together and eat. This was not just nutrition. It was also a moment of being together, sharing, talking. The middle meal varied according to working hours. A farmer working in the fields would maybe take a short break with the bread he had brought with him. This was more of a habit done to suppress hunger. Every society, of course, had its own eating habits, but some common points were striking. People living in the Mediterranean in 1000 BC were very dependent on grain. The climate was suitable for growing these products. Wheat and barley bread, olive oil, fish and wine were the basic foods of this world. Vegetables were also important. Lentils, chickpeas, onions, garlic frequently appeared on the table. Meat, on the other hand, was eaten mostly on special days. Eating meat every day was a luxury. For an ordinary person, meat would come to the table at festivals, celebrations, or sacrifice ceremonies. Fish was different, however. For people living by the sea, fish was much more accessible. Salted, dried fish was both cheap and could be stored for a long time without spoiling. People who did not live by the sea would eat fish very rarely throughout their lives, perhaps never at all. In the fertile lands of Mesopotamia lying between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, people had developed a nutritional system built on barley, wheat, and dates. Dates were as precious as gold in this region. A sweet energy source, durable, storable, and versatile. Sumerian and Babylonian tablets even left us recipes from that period. The oldest known recipes in history are on these tablets. There were meat dishes made with lamb, onion, garlic, and various herbs. Beer also existed in that period and was consumed not just for pleasure, but also for its nutritional value. In the Far East, the picture was very different. In China, rice was not just food, it was culture. In Japan, seafood and rice shaped things together. In India, spices entered life at a very early stage. Spices like turmeric, ginger, and coriander were used both for flavor and for medicinal purposes. Every society was influenced by the conditions of the region they lived in. Whatever nature gave them, that is what they consumed. Spending time in the kitchen today can be a popular hobby. You love cooking, you look up recipes online, you cook for your friends on weekends. It is a nice activity. In ancient times, however, cooking was not a hobby, it was a responsibility. Generally, this responsibility fell on the shoulders of women. Women would wake up early in the morning and light the wood fire. They would prepare bread dough and spread it on the oven or on the stone. They would chop, boil, and cook the vegetables. All of this would happen at the same time, and the whole family depended on it. Cooking techniques were also not as varied as today. People were extremely creative, burying in the ground, cooking on stone, cooking with steam, roasting by turning over fire. Every culture developed its own method. In that period, people found these techniques through trial and error. Salt was very important in the old days. Today we take salt from the shelf and use it in our food. But in that period, salt was precious, so precious that in some communities it was used like money. In the Roman army, soldiers were given part of their salary in salt. The English word salary comes from the Latin word sal, meaning salt. Today we talk a lot about probiotics, gut health, and fermented foods. People have been consuming fermented food for thousands of years because they had to store food. Fermentation was an effective solution for preserving fruits and vegetables for a long time without a refrigerator. They fermented milk and it became yogurt and cheese. They fermented vegetables and it became pickles. They fermented grains and it became bread and beer. They fermented fish and it became various sauces and preserves. This process not only preserved food, but also made it easier to digest. We know today that these fermented foods are extremely beneficial for gut bacteria. Our ancestors did not know this, but they were doing the right thing instinctively. This is a legacy left to us by the past. When we come to about 1,000 years ago, to the Middle Ages, table culture had taken on a very interesting form. In this period in Europe and the Middle East, what you ate depended on who you were. If you were a peasant, bread, vegetable soup, fruit, and perhaps rarely meat. If you were noble or wealthy, plenty of meat, game birds, sweets, spiced dishes, wine. The table was an area of display. The more food you could put on it, the more exotic spices you could use, the more powerful you were. Spices had an incredible power in this period. Black pepper, cinnamon, cloves, saffron. Bringing these from Asia to Europe was very expensive, and so they were a symbol of wealth. The trade of these spices was so important that it changed the world. When Columbus was searching for America, he actually wanted to reach spices more cheaply. So one of the things that shaped today's world map was the desire for spices at the table. The 18th century, meaning the 1700s, was right before an important turning point in the history of nutrition. During this period, the Industrial Revolution had not yet fully begun. Most people still lived in rural areas, growing their own food or buying from local markets. The daily table of a European peasant looked like this. They would wake up very early and eat a heavy bread or oats. They would work in the fields until evening, take a short break at noon and eat the dry bread and cheese they had brought with them. When they returned home in the evening, they would make vegetable soup in the big pot on the fire and eat that. Meat was still a luxury. Sugar was still rare. Coffee and tea were just beginning to enter daily life. Especially in England, drinking tea became a major habit in the 18th century. The French table, on the other hand, had taken on a more refined character. France was one of the first countries in this period to accept culinary culture as an art. Chefs began to emerge. Recipes were written down. Restaurants opened for the first time. Yes, the restaurant was born in 18th century France. But it is important to remember this, that refinement belonged only to the upper class. The vast majority of people still ate simply, plainly, and seasonally. You had to be very wealthy to eat well. In the past, eating was not just about filling your stomach. It was also a gathering, a ritual. Throughout the day, each family member did different things. Men worked in the fields or at work. Children had different duties. Women worked at home. When evening came, everyone came together. They would sit around the table and talk about the day. Children would listen to their elders. Elders would teach children about life. Problems were shared. Joys were shared. This tradition strengthened family relationships. What do we do today? Most of the time, everyone eats in their own room. Eating while looking at their phone or computer. Eating in front of the television. Separately at different hours. Nobody talks to anybody. This is not just a change in eating habits. It is a change in the structure of society. In the past, people wanted to grow their own food. Even people living in cities had small gardens. There were no balconies, but there were courtyards. And in those courtyards, tomatoes, peppers, and onions would grow. In villages, all of life was tied to the land. The planting and harvest calendar was the calendar of life. When spring came, you planted. Throughout summer, you watered and grew the crops. In autumn, you harvested. You prepared for winter. This cycle was both healthy and hard. It was healthy because there was natural, additive-free, fresh food. People could stay physically fit while working. There were vegetables and fruit eaten in their season. There was meat and milk containing no additives whatsoever. There were fermented, gut-friendly foods. There were no processed foods because there was no processing technology. It was hard because if the harvest went badly, hunger followed. Drought or flooding would take away an entire year of effort. In some years, when such events occurred, famine would emerge. There was no security whatsoever. People ate only as much as they planted in the ground. In the late 18th century and early 19th century, the world underwent a great transformation, the Industrial Revolution. This transformation that began in England spread to the entire world in a short time. Factories were built. People migrated from villages to cities. Life took on a completely different shape, and this change reflected itself on the table too, both very quickly and very deeply. People had until recently been peasants working their land. They grew their own vegetables and raised their own animals. Everyone made their own bread. When we woke up in the morning, the land determined what we would eat. Now what happened? We live in a small apartment in the city. We are far from the fields. We have no garden. We work 10 hours a day in a factory. We have no time to cook at home. It was right at this point that eating habits began to change. In the 19th century, the table of factory workers was not very encouraging. Long working hours, low wages, and the conditions that city life brought condemned people to a very plain diet. Working conditions were tough. Something quickly eaten before going to work in the morning. A short break at the factory at noon. A simple meal prepared exhausted when returning home in the evening. Meat still too expensive to buy. Fresh vegetables hard to find. Fruit a luxury. Bread again at the center. Cheap, filling, available everywhere. Potatoes also gained great importance in this period. Especially in Northern Europe, potatoes became the savior of the working class. Cheap, easy to grow, filling. What we need to pay attention to about this period was this. People were no longer producing their own food, they were buying it. This change that looked small was actually a revolution. The human being who had been tied to the land for thousands of years became completely dependent on the outside for the first time. The Industrial Revolution did not only bring factories. Great initiatives were also made in food technology. In the early 19th century, a Frenchman named Nicolas Appert discovered something. If food was heated in airtight containers, it would stay unspoiled for a very long time. This was the birth of canned food. Armies immediately put this technology to use. Soldiers could now carry canned food with them on long campaigns. In a short time, this technology spread to civilians as well. The refrigerator became widespread at the beginning of the 20th century. And this truly changed everything. Now food could be stored for days, for weeks. Seasonality slowly began to lose its importance. Eating tomatoes in winter was no longer a dream. On top of this, the industrial-scale production of flour, sugar, and grains made food both cheaper and more standardized. Everyone began using the same flour, the same sugar, the same oil. Local, diverse, original flavors slowly fell into the background. The 20th century was the fastest period of change in the history of nutrition. 2 world wars, economic crises, technological leaps, and globalization all transformed the table. During the Second World War, food shortages were experienced all around the world. In many countries, basic foods like bread, sugar, and meat were consumed in limited amounts. People learned to do a great deal with few ingredients. Not wasting food was important. Every bite was precious. After the war, however, the situation reversed. Especially in America, an era of abundance began. Factories were now producing not just weapons but food. Supermarkets appeared. Frozen foods became widespread. Most importantly, fast food culture emerged. In the 1940s and 1950s, brands like McDonald's grew rapidly in America. The idea was simple: fast, cheap, standard. Hamburger, French fries, fizzy drink. No need to wait. No need to wash dishes. This model was so successful that it spread to the entire world in a short time. In the 1970s and 1980s, fast food chains began opening on every continent. Eating habits were never the same again. We need to be honest here. If ready-made food and fast food became this widespread, there is a reason for it. Actually, there are several reasons. The first is the matter of time. Today, everyone's life is very busy. You wake up early in the morning. You rush to work or school. There is traffic. There are meetings. There is getting the child to school. When you come home in the evening, you are tired. You have neither the time nor the energy to cook for hours. Ready-made food or fast food seems like a very good solution in this situation, and sometimes it really is. The second is the matter of price. Buying quality fresh food is expensive, especially in big cities, especially for low-income families. Fast food means cheap calories. A hamburger meal can sometimes be cheaper than buying fresh vegetables and meat and cooking them. The third is the matter of habit. In today's world, a generation grew up eating fast food from childhood. These tastes became engraved in our brains. Fatty, salty, sugary foods trigger dopamine release. Our brains love these tastes. A healthy but plain meal cannot give our brain that instant pleasure. The fourth is the matter of marketing. The food industry takes extremely strategic steps, billions of dollars in advertising, campaigns targeting children, a sign on every corner, an advertisement on every screen. Our food choices are under the influence of this marketing far more than we realize. So ready-made food and fast food saved us time, or what did they make us lose? The first and most important loss was the family table. In the past, the evening meal was the meeting point of the family. Everyone was together. They would talk and share. Children grew up beside their elders. Research today shows that in many families, a shared weekday evening meal is now a rare thing. Everyone has a different schedule. One person is working late, another is at sports, the child is outside. Special effort is needed to come together at the table. Research has shown that children who eat regularly with their family have better eating habits, experience less depression and anxiety, and are more successful at school. So the table is not just a place where food is eaten. It is a place where a child's character develops, where family bonds are built. The second loss was seasonality. Now we can eat strawberries in January. It sounds nice, but actually those strawberries grew thousands of kilometers away. They were harvested, transported in cold chains, traveled thousands of kilometers, and waited on the shelf. Those strawberries are no longer natural. A strawberry carrying large amounts of chemical substances. Food eaten in its season is both more nutritious and more delicious. Today everything is available at all times, but it no longer has its old quality. It is harvested before it is ripe. It ripens on the road. The third loss was kitchen knowledge. In the past, every woman and most men knew how to cook. They had learned from their mothers. They had learned from their grandmothers. How to knead dough, how to marinate meat, how to store vegetables, how to set up pickles. These were pieces of knowledge passed down through generations. Today, many young people do not have basic cooking knowledge. Most are not even trying to improve themselves. Saying this is not criticism, it is observation. The system was built that way. Ready-made options were offered so that you would not need to cook. Globalization profoundly affected the world of nutrition. Today in the city where you live, you can eat Japanese sushi, Mexican tacos, Indian curry. This is a richness. But that same globalization put local cuisines under threat. Today the world of nutrition paints a complex picture. On one side there is incredible abundance and variety. On the other side there are serious problems. According to World Health Organization data, more than 1 billion people in the world live with obesity, and this number grows every year. Processed foods, sugar, trans fats, sedentary lifestyle, all combining to create serious health problems. People eat too much and do not exercise. What is interesting is this. Both obesity and malnutrition exist in the world at the same time. In some regions, people eat too much, in some regions, too little. Both pictures are unhealthy. Today, when you go to the supermarket, the large majority of the shelves are full of processed foods. These contain large numbers of additives, colorings, preservatives, sweeteners, very far from original food, cheap, tasty, long-lasting. On one side, people saying carbohydrates are the enemy. On the other side, people saying cut out fat. On another side, people saying only eat meat. On another side, people saying go vegan. In the age when the internet became popular, everyone became a nutrition expert. People have difficulty finding what is true. In recent years, an interesting movement began. People want to return again to the old, the natural, the simple. The number of people doing organic farming increased. People want to consume additive-free, naturally grown products. Instead of shopping at the market, buying directly from the producer became a preference. Seasonal eating is back on the agenda. The Eat in Season, buy local movement is spreading around the world, both healthy and environmentally friendly, and supports local producers. Home cooking culture is coming back. During the pandemic, many people rediscovered cooking at home. They fermented bread, made fermented products, reconnected with the kitchen. Fermented foods became fashionable. Kefir, kimchi, kombucha, pickles. These are no longer old-fashioned. They are a symbol of healthy living. We are making a conscious choice to do what our ancestors did out of necessity. Thousands of years have passed. The table changed, the foods changed, the cooking methods changed. But one thing did not change: the need of people to eat together. In every corner of the world, in every culture, in every period, people came together and ate. This ritual is an expression of being together, of sharing, of love. Why does the family table still feel so precious? Because at that table there was not only food, there was effort, there was love, there were stories. Perhaps when we are changing our eating habits, the only question we need to ask is not this: is this healthy? Perhaps the real question is this: am I eating this meal with joy, together with someone? A table where the answer is yes is always more satisfying. It helps reduce your stress. Today we talked about many things. We started from 3,000 years ago. We went to Mesopotamia. We looked at Middle Age tables. We talked about what the Industrial Revolution did to the kitchen, and we came here, to today, to now. It was a long journey, but I hope it was enjoyable. Finally, I hope that when you go home this evening, there is someone you love at your table. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next videos.